The new VCP is effective on July 1st for FY 2024. The first thing I want to do is highlight the substantive changes. So every year we update the VCP to match the appropriation language. As y'all are all aware at this point, the language did change some, so we've updated that section. In last year's VCP, based on appropriations, every employee was moved to the minimum funding. Since every employee should be there now, this specific section has been removed from the funding section, but it should be noted that in your current appropriations language, it still requires that employees not be paid below the minimum salary. We removed it from the actual funding mechanism, but you are still required to pay the minimum salary for the job class. We added a job offer match component. Since the onset of this project, we have communicated and allowed agencies to match competing job offers. However, it was not added to the plan. We've made provision for that now. We updated all the market salaries based on our board approving that. We combined the additional comp, special comp board item with the VCP, so it's all one action in one item in one place. We did this just because the additional comp, special comp item is dependent on the VCP, and they both had to be filed separately with the Secretary of State for public comment, and so we combined them and have one action with the Secretary of State rather than two. And then lastly, there was a new type duty location approved by our board for July 1st for high turnover jobs, and we'll talk about that in a few slides. So the first part of the VCP is the statement of purpose. This section didn't change other than removing the previous VCP appropriations language and then replacing it with the FY 2024 language. It's all comes straight from every appropriation bill. It also updates the compliance language and legislative intent with regards to vacancy funding. So this section didn't change. Who's covered is still covered, who's not is not. So state service employees and positions, non-state service employees and positions that are excluded from state service but subject to our salary state authority. These would be your part-time people, your time-limited people, your X-16 people, things like that. Who's not covered are non-state service agencies such as Supreme Court, military department, judicial performance. Occupations such as attorneys and physicians are still not bound by the rules of the VCP. And then designated positions at Department of Ag and Commerce. But like I said, there were no substantive changes for this section. Next section is legislative intent of funding mechanisms. The three are salary progression, cost of living, and performance. Funds, as y'all are aware, were not provided for across the board increases this session, but the legislature did provide funding for these mechanisms to the vast majority of agencies. As mentioned, the legislature provided funding to move all employees to minimum, and that was captured in this section in the previous years. Since every employee is now there, we removed it from the funding mechanism since everybody was already funded to the minimum. So that was the only change in this section, was removing the minimum funding. This section did not change. Every classification has a pay plan and a pay grade. We have a minimum market, maximum salary. There are 4 zones within each pay grade, 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1 and 2 are below market, 3 and 4 are above market. It's your job to maintain equity by considering peers with the same job family who have similar attributes. In any salary determination subject to equity audits by the personnel board staff. No changes to any of the salary zones. 1 and 2 are made at the agency level, subject to equity review. Zone 3 is above market. Require state personnel director or designee approval. That's the MSPB 2 second level of approval in order to be processed. We look at equity and things like that as well. Salary zone 4 is the highest, the top end of the pay grade, reserved for those employees who have exemplary performance, broad and deep knowledge of the position, and or possess scarce skills or licenses and certifications that are highly valued in the market. Salary decisions in Zone 4 require our full board approval, with the exceptions noted on the next 2 slides, or in the salary scales and statute. There were no, like I said, no changes to any of these sections. The Zone 4 automatic qualifiers have not changed. They are the same as they've been for the past 8 months now, 9 months. So, but these are the certifications that will automatically qualify you for Zone 4. So if you had an auditor that went and got their CPA license, they can move into Zone 4 without having to go to our board. If you have an EIT, engineering training, geologist in training, academic teacher, they're not bound by the Zone 4 rules. Any of these certifications would allow them to move into Zone 4. The one we most recently added was this qualifier for employees with 20 years of related experience. They're bound by the 10% maximum increase for InRange adjustments per fiscal year, but they don't have to go back to our board for a separate request if they have 20 years of experience related to their current classification. Compensation delivery mechanisms did not change. It's still title change, promotion, InRange adjustments, demotions, and legislative increases. All salary decisions, again, are subject to equity audits before or after approval. Title changes, again, can be upwards, downwards, or laterals. Processed if cost neutral. And by cost neutral, we mean you have the money to do it in the salary dollars that you've been afforded by the legislature. Field title changes from the worker to the supervisory level require personnel board approval if the minimum salary is greater than $70,000. This change happened back in October. That was effective on January 1st. But you can now go from the worker level to the supervisor level. It only has to go to our board if the new minimum salary is greater than $70,000. All other title changes are approved by the state personnel director or his designee. Total maximum for title changes 15%, with the noted exceptions that have been there since the go live of this project. But if you're going from the general pay plan to any other pay plan, or if a medical pay plan employee gets an advanced certification. So if a CNA gets their LPN license, they can go more than 15%. If a LPN gets their RN gets their nurse practitioner, they can get more than 15%. Promotions, again, didn't change. They've moving from one position to another at a higher level. How many pay grades should be considered between the old and new title, the current salary in relation to the peers in the same pay grade, performance reviews. The total maximum for promotion is 15%. There are exceptions to this, the same as the last one. There's also an exception of if the 15% maximum creates a documented salary inequity. I would add a third exception would be if you posted this position open for the general public and an internal candidate, either within your agency or within another agency inside of state government, can earn the posted salary. They won't be bound by the 15% either, because you gave the opportunity to somebody off the street and could have paid them off the street that money. We're not going to penalize a state employee for being a state employee. So if you posted it, they applied for it, and you want to hire them, they could get the advertised salary. This section didn't change on InRange adjustments. There's still 3 mechanisms within this: salary progression, which is the most common, equity, and immediate labor market change. They're capped at 10% cumulative total per fiscal year. There's been a little bit of confusion over the past couple of months. That 10% would apply if you hire somebody from a different agency and they'd already received their InRange adjustment or part of it. They would still be capped as a 10% cumulative for the whole year, regardless of what agency you work for. And then there's also been some confusion on how to calculate that. It's not 10% of their July 1st salary. It's 10% worth of increases. So if you did 5% and 5%, it would be 5% of on the first time of their current salary, and then 5% on top of the new salary. So just something to keep in mind, because there's been a little bit of confusion on that front. Demotions haven't changed. So if it's voluntary within 12 months, they're going to go back to their salary before the promotion. If it's after 12 months, adjust the pay to the appropriate level within the new range based on the employee's qualifications and their peers. If it's involuntary due to discipline or performance, the agency gets to determine, based on the level of egregiousness or performance, the appropriate level to pay them within the new range after the demotion. Additional compensation. These are things like extensive travel, standby, callback, shift pay, TDL, things like that. There were no changes to the policy for utilizing additional compensation, but like I mentioned, there is a new type D location pay we'll talk about when we get into the plans themselves. But the policy itself on how to use them and how to implement them did not change for FY24. Agency head salary determination is the same. Every year in December, our board approves maximum salaries for agency heads based on the prevailing wage in the market. Y'all can pay your agency heads, or they can be paid up to the maximum at any point. If it's appointed by the governor, then we have to have a letter from the governor. If it's appointed by a board or commission, we have to have signed and approved minutes authorizing the salary increase. Our board, the personnel board, must approve any decrease in salaries for agency heads. This code section hasn't changed, but 25.339 says that no employee can make more than the governor, more than the agency head, or 150% of the governor. With a few exceptions, physicians and actuaries are exempt from this provision. And then the statewide have a separate exemption for this current calendar year. But in general, employees can't make more than their agency head or 150% of the governor. The performance review system requirements, this has been in the VCP since, I don't know, probably since it went live in '81, but there were no changes to this section. We're going to talk about performance reviews in NeoGov Perform a little bit later, but this section didn't change in terms of you are required to have a performance review to process an action under the VCP. All right, here's where we added the additional comps and special comp plans to the VCP. We asked the board and they approved one new additional type D location pay, and then we continued the rest of the plans. Type D location pay exists for support care workers in the direct health occupational group. I'm sorry, this is the new one. I apologize. The new TDL is a special comp designed to pay employees who perform extraordinary duties or work at extraordinary locations specifically for high turnover families. In order to be eligible for this pay, employees and physicians must be in the families listed and have made a good faith recruitment effort without success. Our board defined good faith recruitment efforts as not limited to, but should include multiple postings within a specific geographic area with fewer than 10 applicants. This form of additional compensation should only be utilized once all other mechanisms within the plan have been exhausted, and the job families authorized our support care in the direct health occupational group, the benefits and eligibility family, the social services family, transportation infrastructure maintenance, correctional security, and nursing. That's the new one. It's approved at 10% for those families once all other avenues have been exhausted. All the ones for continuation didn't change. The academic teacher pay plans are all based on the teacher pay plan approved by legislature 2 years ago in 37.19.7, and then prorated for a 12-month salary. Employees in the academic teacher, speech therapist, and speech pathologist and counselor classifications can make up to the salary that corresponds with their level of licensure, degree, and experience. But none of these changed. The school attendance officers special comp plan is in Mississippi Code as well. It still exists. Engineer and training plans for transportation, environmental quality of the Department of Health. Geologist in training at the Department of Environmental Quality. Post-secondary salary schedule for vocational instructors at the Department of Corrections. Type D location pay for nurses, direct care workers, highway patrol officers, specialized units, maximum security shifts for correctional officers and law enforcement officers at specialized units. Detailed to specialized units are all approved for type D location pay. All right, so that's it for the VCP. I'm going to move on to a couple of other things that I want to just highlight for you guys as what we're seeing, what's coming, just so y'all are aware. There'll be more communication from us, MMRS, Elbow, as we get closer to these deadlines, but we wanted to make y'all aware of them now to start this process. So because we're still utilizing SPARS for payroll for the foreseeable future, we're pausing the request to inactivate positions that are either unfunded, unused, not utilized. This is due to the unique short name that is required for SPARS on every position in EC, while EC allows for the reactivation of inactive positions. SPARS, as you will remember, does not allow for the unabolishment of positions. So you could reactivate it in EC, but when it tries to recreate it in SPARS, it's going to use the old short name, and that pin has been abolished in SPARS, and it cannot recreate it. And we cannot edit the short name in EC. So once we move to ECP, we will resume the inactivation push. But for now, don't inactivate a position unless you know unequivocally you will never use it in the future. Okay. Secondly, NeoGov Perform is still scheduled to go live on July 1st of 2023. We have not set a deadline for when the performance reviews must be created in the new system, but it will be in FY 2024. Once that deadline is set and passed, we will then begin enforcing the PRS requirement in the VCP, as personnel board staff will have access to every agency to ensure a performance review has been established for each employee you request action on. This is your first alert. Again, you're going to get numerous communication from us over the coming months about this project, but this is just your first alert that is coming. As a reminder, NeoGov Perform will allow for the creation, review, routing, and approval of performance reviews. This routing and review and approval will be based on the report to positions in EC. I know I've talked to several of you even this week who have stated, yeah, we need to get our chart right in EC. Now's the time to start, because performance reviews are going to be based on who the report to is in EC. Third, we've had several conversations with Elbow over the past couple of weeks regarding the FY 2025 budget instructions. And they've asked me to talk to y'all about three things. The first is that if over the course of the past fiscal year, FY 23, you have requested, or in FY 24, you've requested funds to be moved out of salaries into other categories, Elbow does not want to see requests having to have those salary dollars restored. If you didn't need them in salaries, you moved to contracts, and now you're asking for the same amount in salaries again. They don't want to see those kind of requests. So just putting that out there. The second point I was asked to relay is that the old SPARS projections utilized for budget preparation have been replaced with your actual payroll expenditures, annualized expenditures. That will be the starting point, and because Elbow has access to updated information every month, they can better monitor current expenditures for FY 24 in preparation for FY 25. The third thing is that budget request for FY 2025, Elbow is going to allow the request for agencies to request salary reductions and move money into other categories through the 25 budget request process, with the understanding that headcount will also reduce correspondingly. So if you need to move money in your 25 budget from salaries to another category, Elbow is going to allow that request to go through in the budget process for review, with the understanding that your headcount will also be reviewed in accordance with that. So those are the three things I was asked to mention. So there it is. All right. Conversion. Lockout date is June 14th. The last day for new hires to be entered in NeoGov will be June 13th. New transactions in EC will be June 14th. We will do our absolute very best to ensure that actions impacting salaries, such as new hires, transfers, and compensation changes, get priority in processing before we start conversion. The sooner you get the actions in the system, the better. That will be difficult enough, trying to clear everything out with the board meeting and everything else going on that week. And the sooner we can clear stuff up, the better. But at the same time, we really need your help to get things in early in June. Once we have processed all that we can have time to process in June, we will then have to create several load files for MRS to adjust each person, position, and job classifications, market, and end salaries. We will also be working with 6 different agencies to create unique load files due to transferring employees and positions between masters and sub-agencies. And lastly, we will have to create a file for MRS to update the end date for all time-loaded positions to move the end date from 6/30/23 to 6/30/24. The last comment on the conversion I will make is that I was made aware only yesterday morning that NeoGov actions for future dates initiated by API of the system cannot be updated prior to their effective date. So if you hired someone today on May 26th, effective on June 15th, you can't go add the work schedule and recurring payment until that person is in the position on June 15th. This will pose a problem with those dates for lockout, obviously, because you'll be locked out on the 14th. You can't go add the payment on the 15th. I've emailed MMRS this morning to find out what their proposed solution is. And once we get some clarity from them, they or we will notify you of what we're going to do in those cases for June. All right, that's it for conversion. This 5th comment I know is a point of contention for many of you. As far as EC is concerned, Class Comp has been meeting weekly to review actions that are providing difficulties, as well as look at specific types of actions to ensure we are being consistent in what comments in EC, as well as documentation we're requiring. We started that about 2 or 3 months ago. I think it's gone well. We probably should have been doing that all along, but we are getting together weekly to discuss these types of things to make sure we're being consistent, providing you guys with consistent information as we review these requests. I also want to make you aware that some of your counterparts on this call can confirm it. There are many instances where we literally can't see an action in Employee Central. We don't mind emails asking for status updates. We don't know if it's pending sometimes until you ask, and then we have to go into manage workflow and manually assign it to your analyst. So don't hesitate to email asking for a status update. Our goals is and will always be to have actions reviewed within 5 days. This week, we've also made a point of emphasis that if we do need to return an action for you for some reason, that we spell out to you specifically what we need, we need X, Y, and Z to process this action. I know I've gotten some phone calls in the past couple of weeks that we'll send an action back asking for X, and then you provide X, and then we send it back saying, well, we also need Y and Z. So we're going to make that a point of emphasis that if we have to send it back, that we're going to tell you everything we need rather than kind of piecemealing this together, because I know that delays your processes as well. The vast majority of you have been incredibly patient and understanding with us. I can't tell you how much I appreciate that personally, and our staff appreciates it. We're going to get through it. We're going to get better. We're going to keep working on getting better. But again, if you have a question about a status, don't hesitate to email your analyst, their lead, me, and we will see what we can do about the situation. As far as NeoGov, we have posted and received our list for 2 new analysts in careers counseling. That's our goal is to have them in seats on July 1st. With that, we will essentially be doubling our capacity to post positions, refer list, and review applications. Once these new employees are up to speed, we are hopeful to get our time frame down to 48 hours from correct and complete requisition received to our website and every list in your hands within 24 hours of job closing. This is something that is sprung up over COVID, where our job postings went from 350 a month to 750 a month, and our staffing levels didn't adjust accordingly. The legislature has provided us 2 new analysts to help with that workload, and we are going to get back to where we are posting jobs as quickly as we possibly can and getting you lists as quickly as we possibly can in the very near future. All right, effective dates. Retroactive pay is an animal, and like it says, I promise you we hate them as much as you do. Malika, Billy, Daniel, and I have been working with MMRS and their third-party vendor FEUs, up to 10 hours a week for the past couple of months to make EC better. We're doing this by creating event derivation for actions impacting salaries, as well as putting the VCP rules in Employee Central. This is tentatively being called EC 2.0, and it will launch in conjunction with ECP, Employee Central Payroll. Through these conversations, we have been told unequivocally and on numerous occasions that ECP is not designed for retroactive payments and hates it more than we do. Okay? Every time a retroactive payment is necessary in ECP, in addition to the usual things we require, MMRS will be required to manually enter the change in ECP for you after the manual changes and calculations have been made on what is owed. We are proposing to MMRS that the payroll calendar, that's, if you go look at DFA's website, for those of you not familiar with it, this is the pay calendar for this month, for May of 23. We're proposing they add 2 columns to this calendar. The first would be a deadline for agencies to enter actions impacting salaries into EC by a specific date, and then a second date would be for the person aboard to have them processed. In this May example, I would see a reasonable time frame where actions would need to be entered by May 14th and approved by us by May 21st in order to be paid on May 23rd for May 1st. We received well over half of our requests impacting salaries in the second half of months effective for the 1st. We're still receiving actions today that are effective for May 1st. ECP is not going to allow that. This is just, again, a first alert. There will be more to come, more conversations about this, but you guys need to be aware it's coming so that you can start making plans accordingly and adjusting accordingly, because this is coming and it's going to change the way we process things and our timelines internally and your timelines as far as getting things in the system. Last 2 comments, Employee Central. I've said this before in some of these trainings, but Employee System is the new system of record. Your analyst email is not, nor is mine. If I'm reviewing these actions at the house, I don't have access to your analyst email where you emailed them all the information needed. I know in some instances you can't attach documents to certain actions in Employee Central. That will always be the case. In these meetings with MMRS, I don't think that's ever going to be resolved. But the comment field for why you're doing what you're doing, it would be really helpful if it was utilized on the front end to explain the action you're submitting. And lastly, paper applications are acceptable only for exempt positions, title changes, and non-competitive promotions. If you submit a paper application, it needs to be filled out in its entirety, including the correct job title, and it needs to be signed by the employee itself. The last note I have is that personally, I will be out of the office on Tuesday and Wednesday of next week. If you need something, please reach out to Malika or Billy on those 2 days, and they will be more than happy to assist you. So that's all I have. I will open it up for questions if anybody has any.
Hey Ryan, this is Katie. I put this in the chat, but I just missed the second item that you said Elbow wanted you to share with us. Would you mind repeating? There was something about using the annualized salaries, but I just...
Right, so in the old budget process, we used to send y'all a SPARS projection as kind of the baseline for your next year's request. Because we can't do SPARS projections and because payroll expenditures are more accurate, because they capture non-projectable additional comp, they capture overtime payments, things like that. They're just far more accurate in what you're actually doing. And because we get that updated monthly and Elbow has access to it whenever they want it, we're going to start using that as our baseline for the next year's budget. And then rather than as far as projections.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, one more, I lied.
Sure.
For the new high turnover TDL,
Uh-huh.
would that amount be determined based on need at the time that the request is made? The percentage for that TDL, how would that work?
Yeah, so the way it would be, the way we envision this one is this is one that it's a temporary type due location pay, or it could be temporary. So we would want something probably signed by each employee saying, I understand this is temporary based on my location and my job classification. It may go away at any time, because it might come a time where you need it now, and in 6 months, 18 months from now, you don't need it. But it would be added to the PIN just like any other additional comp. It's calculated 10% of their base pay. We really want to look at the other avenues available, but the board, we asked the board and they agreed that we need to make some of these job classes are just these 7 are the top 7 every year on our highest turnover jobs, and we know that the agencies that use those jobs struggle specifically in certain areas to keep people, and so it's just another tool in the toolbox. If it will help, great. If you don't need it, that's fine too. But it's effective July 1st, and you can start using it then. Again, like I said, once we've looked at other options available. Did that answer the question? Okay, I got a thumbs up. Good. When is the document going to be on the website? I don't know that answer. We can probably get it out there today or early next week. We'll get it out there either today or early next week, Maureen. If we have no vacant positions in our agency and have a need for additional employees, can we request for additional headcount? If you had a 100% fill rate, I'm not sure, Shell, if you could clarify if we're talking about for FY24 or FY25, but if in FY24 you max out your headcount, Personnel Board does not have the authority to increase your headcount. That would need to be in your request for 25. You still have the option if it's new funding or something like that to go through DFA for the escalations, but that's really that's between you and DFA. You can certainly ask one for 25. If it happens in 24, we don't have the authority as the Personnel Board to give you additional headcount beyond what's in your bill. That gets me caught up in chat. Anybody else? Well, new chat. Oh, look at Leanne. Leanne Robinson, who is the Deputy Director of ELBO, said if it's needed for FY 2024, it would have to be a deficit appropriation, which they'd have to handle in January when they came back into session. How will the progression funds be listed? I meant to mention that. Thank you, Robin. So we're still working with ELBO. We're hoping to have the vacancy and the vacancy and progression money finalized that week of June 5th. And so we're hoping to get that information to you that week. We got to get through the end of this month and see where we are and meet with ELBO and figure out what the final vacancy number is. But we'll push that out to you as soon as we have those numbers finalized. I'm expecting it to be that week of June 5th. We'll be able to enter contracts in Magic during conversion. Tisha, that I don't know. If you've historically been able to, I would imagine you will continue to be able to. We don't discuss that, so I don't know. We don't cover that. It's not really under our purview. But if you've always been able to, I would imagine you'd still be able to during the lockout period. But if not, then probably not. I know you can still run payroll and travel and time and things like that. So I would assume you can still do contracts because it doesn't really impact what we're doing for conversion. But that's probably a better question for MRS. And Christy, I think I hit your answer in response to Robin's.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Can you go back over the in-range adjustments and PRAs? Yeah, so in-range adjustments, what are we talking about? Devin, can you clarify? Are we talking about in conjunction with each other or separately? I love it. All right. So the VCP has always required a performance review on file with us in order to process an action. I started here in 2006, and we weren't requiring it then, and we haven't really pushed hard on that requirement because there's not a good way for us to keep track of 24,000 people's performance reviews. With NeoGov Perform, we will have a very clear and easy way to track who has a performance review open, who doesn't, who's doing them, who's not. Once we set that deadline and that deadline passes, we're going to begin enforcing that provision. So that's kind of the short answer. There's going to be a lot more information as we get closer to July 1st and then after with how NeoGov Perform is going to work. Fortunately, that doesn't fall under class comp, so that's somebody else's information is coming, and I wanted to make y'all aware of that because we are going to start enforcing that provision of the VCP as soon as we have a reliable way to track it. I don't know if that answers your question or not, Devin, but if not, you can maybe ask a follow-up. I haven't been able to access the compliance report when clicking on the link. It does not open up. Well, let's see. I haven't had that issue. And it might be browser dependent, Audrey. But I'm clicking on it right now and it pulled right up and your agency is there. So you might try a different browser. Sometimes Chrome doesn't play nice with some of our PDFs. So maybe try it in Firefox or Edge and see. If not, I'm assuming you're talking about the compliance report on our homepage. So that is odd, but try a different browser. If that doesn't work, I can get you maybe in touch with our IT people to see if they can help figure it out. Is anybody else having that issue? Okay. Anybody else?
Hey, Ryan, real quick.
Sure.
You said NeoGovs were June 13th for new hires. Since we do have exempt positions, when do you suggest I have those in? What's a good timeline for that?
If so, this is only going to impact NeoGov hires. You can direct hire up until the 14th.
Okay.
And so if it's a NeoGov hire, like I said, I'm hopeful MRS can get back. I'm very confident they're going to tell me the only way to get around this is to hire directly into Employee Central for the month of June and just bypass NeoGov entirely. That's my expected response from them. And if that's the case, you'll get something from communications from us, letting you know that. Just so.
Okay, you said this before, but I honestly can't remember your response. What are your feelings on adding or hiring people prior to the effective date, even out of NeoGov? Like I have 2 people starting June 1st. Can I go on and get them?
Sure. Oh, you can certainly future date. The real problem, I know, especially some of these really big agencies will tell you, is EC doesn't like no-shows. And so, there's an option to separate them as no-show, but as a couple people on this call this week will attest to you, they'll still show up in Magic and they'll still show up in Sparse, even if you flag them as no-show. So, and it will not separate them. So there is the risk of that. Just keep that in mind.
Okay.
But no, you can always you can future date things for sure. It's just you run the risk of having to get the help desk involved to separate them if they don't show. Bobby's asked, to be clear, all actions going forward should be entered prior to their effective date, correct? Ideally, yes. I mean, ideally that probably should have always been the case. The hires are the kind of squirrely one just because of the no-show issue. But promotions, salary increases, the real issue is going to come because SPARS can handle retroactive payment a lot easier than Employee Central Payroll can. As we move to Employee Central Payroll, and I know a lot of y'all met with them yesterday, either morning or afternoon. Whenever it does go live, we're going to have to get a much better handle on things being entered into the system for the current pay period and things being approved by a certain date for the current pay period. So it would be a good idea to get in the habit of future dating, specifically compensation changes, transfers, things like that, because ECP is going to, from what I understand, ECP is not going to handle, once payroll has run for that person, going back and paying them in that pay period, even if it's within the same month, for those things. Yeah, the E-Verify issue is going to be an issue for hires as well. And so it might be that we hire them and we have to separate them if they don't pass the E-Verify. I'm not sure how we're going to handle hires. Hires are an issue right now for numerous reasons. If it's a June 19th hire, Bobby, why don't we wait and get an answer from MRS on how to handle post June 15 hires before we start future dating those? Anybody you're going to hire between the 14th and the 30th, just y'all can hold on to those until we get some clarity for them on how they want us to proceed. Anybody else? Well, I appreciate you guys' time. We're here to help. So if you need us, just give us a holler. We're gonna keep getting better, and we're gonna get through it. What's great is I don't even know who laughed, but I agree. So anyways, if y'all need anything, give us a holler, and we're gonna keep pushing through it.